of the new features for version 2025 for Sage 100, and I'll be demonstrating those items as we go through them. Hopefully everyone can see my screen, and I have turned on my scaling to make my windows a little larger when they open to hopefully make viewing easier. Without further ado, we'll jump into the first one I want to talk about, which I think has been long coming. And Sage has added the option for your invoices, for customer invoices, on being able to now expand the invoice lengths. You do not have to if you want to stay at 7 characters, which it has been at for quite a number of years. You can leave it there, but they did add a new setup option here in the company information to be able to increase that, and that would apply across anywhere you're invoicing from. So whether you do out of accounts receivable, out of sales order, and or if you have the job cost module, it would apply across invoicing across the board. If you do want to expand it, you would simply come in here. Now, we would definitely recommend this is a irreversible change. So if you're going to make this edit, I either want to do it as part of an upgrade when you've got a test environment or in a test company first, just to kind of try it out, make sure it really is what you want to do before moving forward. But you increase it up to what you want. So let's say I want to go to maybe 10 characters, hit accept here, and it will prompt you to run a utility to update all of your existing past invoice numbers to that larger size if you want to. You do not have to. You can say no here if you don't want to change them, but if you want to be consistent with the new length and maybe update old ones to have the full new 10 characters. If it's a numeric invoice, it's going to add zeros at the beginning of the number. If you use alphanumeric invoices, which is a mix, of characters and numbers, those would actually remain unchanged. But I'm going to go ahead and say yes here on mine. There is a way to, if you say no there by accident, there is a way to go launch this utility separately. Give me a little message here, just a warning. It's letting me know that it cannot be undone. I'm going to go ahead and do a proceed here. And it actually goes through and scans all the records, making those changes. This log of entries, it gets added to the activity log in Library Master. So there is an entry made that both of the utility was run and this log of the records numbers of changes. Hit OK there. And so if I were to come over here to customer maintenance to maybe look at an old account, let me pull up here, come to their invoices tab. I know I didn't show it beforehand, but this would have been 7 characters before, so it's added those zeros at the beginning, as I mentioned, to make it larger. Or if I switch over to, I think I've got one that I made here where they were using a mix either of just characters or characters and numbers, those remain unchanged. And if you expanded now to 10 and then later decide, you know what, we need to go to 12, you can increase it further. But as I mentioned, you can't make it go back down. So once it's expanded and stay that way. All right. I'm kind of going to hit on the highlights for each module. Since I'm already in AR, we'll go with that one next. Outside of the expanded invoice number length, this one's a much smaller change, but I do like it. When you are in cash receipts entry now, I think I maybe started a batch here. Make one here, let's say checks for 15. Sorry, my windows keep trying to open on one of my other monitors. Apologies, I'll bring those over as they come up. And I want to do this with Marcus. Like I said, small change, but customer on credit hold. So as you're doing cash receipts entry, if you are entering a receipt for someone who is on credit hold in customer maintenance, it will now kind of just give you that red text at the top. That way, maybe as a reminder that if you are getting payments, you can go see if, okay, maybe I can take them off of credit hold instead of having to keep track of that separately. So it just helps serve as a little reminder. And come back up a module here to General Ledger. I'd say the highlight for GL is just an add-on to one of the existing features that allows you to do journal reversals, which are typically just used for journal entries, as they only reverse the debits and credits and don't touch anything with the submodules. But if I come over here, anyone who's using this feature now may remember this, but when you do them prior to version 2025, it would always set the reversal date to whatever your accounting date was in General Ledger. In this case, mine's got set at 5/15. And almost always you were going in and changing that before posting, which is still a good idea to review this. But what it will do now, let me find one in here that I can maybe play with. Let's use, let's do this one here. Looks like it was a JE. I'm going to use my reversal button here. And what they've changed with it is now, as long as the period is still open in GL, it will actually set the reversal date to be the original date of the entry, so for 5/31. If the period is closed and you try to do that, so my demo data is in May of this year. Let me go ahead and try and do this one. You will get a little warning here letting you know cannot post to a prior period, so it's going to use that accounting date, which is current functionality instead. So you can still go review and edit that if you need to before posting, but it should help if the GL is still open, maybe minimize any errors where you're maybe using the incorrect date that you wanted to use. They come here to look at those entries that I just created. So here's the second one I did. It used that 5/15 date as I mentioned. The one right before that did indeed use the 5/31 date that was on the original posting. All right, let's take a look here. Down our list, let's go to accounts payable. And they didn't do a whole lot with AP this one. There are some features then when we get to purchase order that we'll talk about that kind of tie into accounts payable as well. But on AP of its own, they made one little change here in invoice payment selection. If you're on one of our newer versions, and I'm trying to remember, it was either, I think it was in 2023, but this change, they adjusted this select screen view to, I apologize, let me put my year out here so I have some invoices to select from, to have a checkbox where you could select and choose instead of having the old grid view where you would just highlight lines. Well, what they've done, I guess some people liked that old view, so there is now an option here to have it one way or the other. So it does default to the newer view, but there's this little switch view button now available that if you prefer the old format where you would hold shift and go down or control and point and click, you can go back to using that version of it if you prefer it. Keep going on our list here. I don't think I see any questions so far. I know we're just getting into it. Let's go to inventory. And they did do a couple changes in here. So first of all, in item maintenance, for those that use barcodes on their inventory, there is a new option over here on the additional tab of item maintenance to add a UPC or EAN, which is the Universal Product Code or European Article Number, so the North America ones versus over in Europe. And you can say which type it is, and then based on that type, you can then go down here and put in the values. I've just made up some numbers in here, but it does do some validation on them. So I did a little bit of just Googling myself just because I was curious. So UPCA does like a 12 character length versus E is the shorter barcoded at 6 characters, I want to say. So depending on what type you're selecting, it will help validate that you are putting in appropriate data, or at least an appropriate size of data into this field. There is on forms, they've added a field for this data so that you can put those onto forms and have that barcode printing. It will also prompt you if you're setting up a new one of these. It will ask if you want to add that information as a general alias to show up as alias information as well. If anyone's not using aliases or familiar with what I mean when I say general, it just means that it's kind of global. It's not tied to a specific customer or specific vendor. It's just associated on the item itself. And so I've added just a couple codes here, and just if you want to kind of see what it might look like on a form, let me hop over here. I did a little order that I set up. Let me find my number. I did 105. And so I've got those 2 items that I added the information for. Oh, that's not what I want, actually. I'm going to do a picking sheet here is where I added it for the warehouse. Sorry about that. wrong button. And so I've just made a slightly modified form where I just added those barcodes on. That looks like that, or can look like that. And that barcode information could also be added to the order forms if you needed it to, or invoices. Pick and choose one of the most common places I see it. That's where I chose to use that as a sample. Back up here to inventory. This is a smaller change, but kind of on the topic of barcodes and kind of ties into labels. If anybody uses label printing, this was a small edit, but I was really happy about it because it always has driven me a little crazy, actually. In this screen, if you are ever using label printing in the prior versions, you could only really do one selection, and then the screen would close in between each thing. So they just finally added those keep window open after print and preview options, so that save you some clicks of having to come back in and put in the new item, reopen the screen to put in your new item code that you want, or a new product line, or whatever sort you might be doing. Definitely a time saver. Also in inventory, let me come in here to physical count worksheet. A couple little changes in here that some users might be happy about. One of them is they have added the product line as a sort option. So when you're running your physical count, if you've always kind of wanted those worksheets to print out that way, I'm just going to do my worksheet only for now. And let's say I maybe want one of my warehouses. Just to show it to you here. So now to order all those items, here's all my CNA items, then my BC ones, and so forth, to hopefully make that easier to go out there and count if you've got them stocked on the floor, maybe by product line. They've also, while I'm in here, added the option to print extended item descriptions onto the worksheet if you would like that information. If you want more than that first 30 characters and you've got more data in there and you want that to show, you can choose now to include that as well. All right. So those modules all had lighter changes. Now let's get into the two that I think they did some of the most with, which is sales order and purchase order. And on both of these modules, they have added audit tracking, which is a request that comes up quite often. So over here on the history tab, there's some new options to track changes or not. So if you want to turn that on, you'll be able to turn that on. And then there's an option to track in detail or not. So I'm going to do sales order tracking in detail, so you can kind of see what that looks like versus the not detail. As the name would suggest, this is basically going to give you everything, even the fields, even an audit of all the fields that maybe didn't put data in, but also includes a record of everything that was added when the order was initially created. Whereas if you're not doing detail, you'll get an entry like that it was added, and then you'll get detail on changes that are made to it after that, but only on the specific fields that are touched. So pros and cons of both. I'll show it both ways so you can kind of see it. Over here to sales order entry, and we're going to make a new order. And I'm just going to throw in, let's do for Avnet here. I'll give them a PO number. And I'll leave it all the rest of their defaults over here. Put one of my items on. Let's see, I want to do 10 of those maybe. Or actually, I'll say 100 now. Save that, and then maybe after I save it, I realize, oh, I didn't mean to do 100. It was only supposed to be 10. I just, miskeyed a 0 or something in there. Let's change it up to 10. Looks like that also changed the pricing. So maybe if I needed to, looks like this demo data has some pricing schedules probably set up with quantity breaks. So if I needed to override that, I think it was something around that or so. Maybe to give them the original unit price I gave them or something. I can go and adjust that as well. Hit accept. And then if at any point I want to go back and look at the audit trail for this record, you've got two options. So on the order screen, there's a new little settings gear up here next to the username that made the order, which is for the audit viewer. And so I can take a look here and see there if the order was added, here it was changed, and I can drill into either of these. So here's where I'm at when it's in detail. You know, I only touched a handful of fields, but I am seeing data for everything that was saved as part of this, including the initial items I put on there. There's my 100 at that unit price. And if I want to drill in further to this, you can kind of see it there on the line, but it isolates just what was the original, what was the new, if you're comfortable seeing that. Back up the screen, and if I want to see the change, and these are all fields that the system recalculated as part of the change I made, even though the only thing I adjusted manually was this one here. It's still tracking, I'm sorry, this one and the oh, where's it at? Oh, right there, the pricing on it, the extension not changed. The 100 to 10, it still tracked the other values as well. It does isolate for you a little bit here if it's on the header or the detail that changed. So if I were to come over here and maybe add an additional line, just to kind of show you what the header is going to be, that first tab, detail is going to be your lines tab. Add one of those. And then look at it again here. I've got that additional change with that date and timestamp, the user that did it. And more entries there showing up on the detail than what you saw on the line that was already existing that I edited, versus everything that gets added as part of adding a new line item. The other way to look at that information is through an actual report that they have added down here under the sales order reports for sales order audit report. If you like looking at things more in a PDF. Sorry. And we do have some sort options here, or some not sort values to select, so that I can kind of control maybe just what I'm interested in seeing. Do I just want to see changes? Do I want to see additions? Am I just concerned with things that happen on that lines tab or on the header tab, or maybe something on the payment tab, which I didn't make changes on, but if there was maybe a deposit entered and then the value was changed or something like that. Or if you are doing lot serial distribution at the sales order entry level, and you think something has changed there, it can track that. So we can leave it at all. So we can isolate just want to see these. So maybe I just want to see those lines. Can isolate still a certain number if you want, or you can look at it more from a broad perspective. If you need to see all changes that a particular user made on a certain day or date range, you can isolate by that. And I go ahead and just use that order we just typed in. And so something I've noticed as I play with this, so sometimes this action type added versus changed. So the only thing that's showing up on here is the line that I had already saved and then edited that order quantity. That considered a change. The other changes were changes to the order, but they were added lines. So like that second line I'm not seeing on here because it was a new line added. So sometimes you may need to include that added action as well to maybe get everything you want to see about that order. I personally kind of like the other view because it's to me a little more intuitive on the actual order, but this is going to give you everything from the original order, and then within here you'll be able to see, okay, it was changed, but it was an added type action. I'll pause there just for a moment. I don't think I've seen any questions from anybody, Dee, but anything come in that I've missed?
No, ma'am, there are no questions at this point, Heather. Thank you.
Perfect. Let's go to purchase order while we kind of have the audit trail on the mind. And so this one I've done audit tracking also turned on, but not tracking in detail, just so you can kind of see the differences. Otherwise, the functionality is kind of a mirror of each other between those modules. We'll go to purchase order entry for this one. And same thing, I'm just gonna go ahead and make a new order here. Let's do for, let's see here. For this one, and I'm just gonna leave everything at the default. When I added that one, I saw it was on for my warehouse. I think we want to order. And then I'm going to come back, and maybe the vendor came back and said, "Oh, there's been a price increase. Now that's $32.50 a unit." So we'll change that, and I'm also going to go ahead and add maybe some of these to the list here. And maybe they also gave me some free to expect. Say. So just like on the sales order side, we've got that settings here that's been added up here to PO entry, the auto viewer. Your screen, add in much less information here than when with the details. So pros and cons. So I mean, it really just tracks that, okay, it was added originally, but I don't have the details of what it was all added at when it happened. You do get to control those settings by module. So if you do want it in detail one spot or another, like I've got it, you can certainly do that. And then on the changed, it's more targeted just to specific values that I changed when I added it in there. So if you want the full picture, you're probably going to have detail and then just be, okay, kind of scrolling through to find all the edits that you want to look at. Now, if I do go to the PO reports, same thing as on the sales order side, there's a new purchase order audit report. I've got those same kind of fields. We're going to talk about quote vendors here in just a moment. Get this 35. I forgot to write that one down. There we go. But a lot less to look at here on the PDF than when you had it in detail on the other side. So just depending on what level of information you want to get to. Also, something they have done on both the purchase order and sales order side. Back to this history tab. I think this one's also been kind of long in coming, but they've added a checkbox here that if you want to require cancel or reason codes for when you delete orders or quotes, same thing over on the sales order side. Previously, you only really got that option to add a reason code if you had the setting set to prompt you on if you wanted to delete, and then it would ask if, and if you chose to, then you could assign a reason code for why you were deleting it. But if you just had them set to yes and you were automatically keeping it, you didn't have a way to add a reason code. But now you do. So if you turn that on, if we come up to delete an order, or even if it's still at prompt, if you are still saving history, you'll still be able to put that user code in there, but it will require it to be filled in. Whereas before on prompt and it popped up, you could just close the screen without actually adding something. If that checkbox is selected, you will have to fill it in. Get to one here. So let's say I wanted to, so I'm going to pop up to my other screen. We actually just go to the one I made. We'll come in here, we'll delete this. Confirm, do I want to delete it? Yes, I do. And then if I try to just remove this or close without assigning something because I said it's required, it's not letting me know it's required there. So I can fill in and say maybe maybe I found some better pricing with somebody else. Like the same thing on the sales order side. They've added that on the history tab as well in the sales order options. If you're not using reason codes because there wasn't as much of a reason to set those up, if you were just automatically keeping deleted orders, you can do that here in the setups for each module to cancel and reason code maintenance there to fill out whatever different values you want to have to choose from. It's right here. Let's come back to PO here. And the next feature I want to talk about is one of the bigger ones. In purchase order entry, there is now a way to do a request for quote. So if you want to send out a request maybe to get the best pricing available for a PO to multiple vendors, there is now a way to do that. It does leverage paperless office. So if you were you want to email all three, you can do that. And they've added an AP in the form maintenance. There's going to be a new form for PO quote, so you can give the rules for who gets the emails on that particular form type. Before I go into entry, I actually want to go to the setup. If you're using sales order quotes, these options are very similar. Oh, I've got something open still. Oh, there we go. Back on that. Over here on the purchase order options entry tab, there's some new quote related selections right here. So you can set a default days for when the quote expires for those vendors. You can also choose how does the system handle the unit cost for quotes. So I've got mine set to just be at 0. So I can just send a 0 PO to multiple vendors, have them come back, give me the best pricing, and then choose which of them I'm going to do the purchase order for. But if you don't want it to be at 0, these are your other options. Have it use last unit cost, average, standard, prompt during entry of, and at that point you could tell it which one you wanted to use, or the cost hierarchy that Sage utilizes. And then you can also choose that when you get to that point that you want to turn that quote PO over to a standard order, because you're ready to actually formalize it and send it to that vendor. When you promote it and generate that purchase order, you can tell it whether or not to use the default order date in generating, or if you're not using the essentially the original date, then it could use the if unselected, use the date of the quote, or do you want to use it to the basically your accounting date and PO that day. So do you want the date to change on the day you generate it to be today's date, or do you want it to still retain whatever the original quote date was? Come over here, PO, and under my order types, there is a new one for quote. And so the first vendor you pick is going to show up here on the header, but then there's going to be an option I'll show you in just a moment where you can add additional ones. So let's say I'm going to, for my list on my other screen here, I'm going to go ahead and use Container Corporation again. But then I'm also going to, it says request quote from vendors. Alt Q is your keyboard shortcut if you prefer those. And so then I can add additional vendors to the list here. So let's say I'm also going to do this and from here. And I can also select in here if I want to be able to print that quote for each of them. That could be physically printing, or, and like I mentioned earlier, emailing if those vendors have been set up for paperless for the PO quote form type. At that point, similar header information, want to verify which warehouses it's going to be coming to, where would they be shipping it to. Over in the lines, of course, what am I wanting a quote on? If I pick some of those same items I was playing with earlier, because I told it to 0 my unit cost, it's pulling that through rather than on the other purchase orders, putting in that value for me. Just repeat my lines. If you have, and I don't know if I set this up, let me take a peek here. If you have alias information, these ones look like they're just the same. If you have alias information for the vendors, when you print the PO quote form that we're going to see in just a moment, it will use their alias information for each of those forms by default, so that each vendor will get the PO showing their numbers rather than anybody else's. If there is no alias information, then it will just use your item code. I'll go and do a quick print here. And so it knows because I'm in a quote type, it pulled up a quote printing screen. And I'm just going to do a preview first so you can see it, but it'll say request for quote at the top here. And so then they could like fill out with what they would quote for that and return that to you. And then from there, you can decide which vendor you're going to go with. Here's the one for Airway, one for Acclimate, and Container Corporation. And that is what they would see if you were to email them off to each other as well. So as time goes by, you get those back and you decide that, you know, maybe it wasn't Container Corporation that offered the best pricing. It was, I used Acclimate Maintenance. So before you generate an order from this, you would want to switch this vendor number to be the one you're going to do it for. You can mark that the quote is ready to generate. That's going to allow two things. One, it's going to open up this button down here at the bottom on the screen to be able to generate, or there is an option that they've added to the menu to auto-generate from quotes. So if you have a whole bunch of these that you want to kind of mark ready and then you want to generate them all together, there's a way to do that. And then I could come to the lines, and you could either go ahead and fill out, you know, what Acclimate returned for what that unit cost was going to be in here now, or you could generate the order and do it afterwards, either way. And then I'm going to go ahead and generate from here. We'll do a generate order. I want to know if I want to save my changes. Yes, please. And then as it generates, you can choose if there were, I didn't add any comment lines or memos, but if I had, you can choose whether or not to include that. Because if the comment lines were specifically related to getting a quote, then you may not want those going over. Proceed again. So let me know my next number in my PO sequence. Okay. And so at that point, it has generated a standard order for Acclimate since I already switched the vendor over. If I had forgotten to switch that step, you could, of course, adjust now and just make sure you answer when prompted on how you want to adjust the pricing on the lines. I thought I filled that one in, but yeah, it's there. And then your quote moves into the original quote moves into a completed status. So you still have a record of the quote that was done. You can still see who was involved with it. If those documents were emailed, you'd have a record of them up in Paperless Office in the vendor viewer or here on the vendor electronic delivery inquiry. Or if you're just doing a print PDF of them, you'd have those copies in the vendor viewer as well. All right, I don't see any questions on anything there.
So far, no questions, Heather. Thank you.
Okay. Last little thing in purchase order is in the return of goods section. This is also one of those smaller changes, but something that has always, you know, I want to say bugged me a little bit specifically. And so I know it's come up with other people too, where they need to do a PO return. It may not be an actual return, or even if it is, but you're not planning to get a replacement sent from the vendor, or it might be doing a PO return just to make correct a data entry error mistake, where again you're not planning to get, you know, any kind of replacement. In prior versions, the PO returns always creates a back order onto the PO, which you can then go remove, but it's a secondary step to go remove that back order. That way the system doesn't think you're still waiting on that. They have added a checkbox here though. Let me see if I can pick one that, there we go. So by default, it is going to try to do a back order on that PO, but you can choose either here on the header that, you know what, I'm not going to have any back orders created for this. So I can go ahead and deselect that. And then when I come to the lines, whatever I'm returning isn't going to have a back order created for it. It's a small change, but cuts out that extra step if you know that you're not getting a replacement and don't need that back order. That finishes out our highlights for PO. Let me kind of work my way down the list. There were no changes for RMA, and the only change related to job cost was for that expanded invoice number. Bill materials also did not have any. There are some production management changes. I don't have that in this demo company, but they are listed in the What's New document that we've attached as a handout here on the webinar. Available. There's some changes basically to the work ticket templates where you can change to how the copy feature works a little bit. There's now ways to do the attachments, or it can be specific to the steps as part of the work templates if you use production management versus being available on all of them. Revision numbers can now be alphanumeric. So you can kind of look through those if you have that module. We'll come to Bankrec next though. And they made a couple little changes in here. One of them I'm not going to demonstrate, but I will just briefly talk about. On the positive pay, if anyone does positive pay export, the log that it gives you of which checks it's finding for the selection, most people just preview those, and you can still do that. But if you were to ever hit print, it did physically print out. Now you can hit print, and that will actually go to Paperless Office. It'll show up in the Journal and Register viewer. So if you want to be able to have a paperless copy of that document, you'll now be able to do so. So if you upgrade to version 2025, that'll be a change maybe to start hitting print if you're used to doing preview to make sure you get that paperless copy. Otherwise, I'm going to come up here to Reconcile Bank. And two smaller changes in this screen. One, they have added this total amount cleared. So as you're doing your bank reconciliations, it'll keep a running total for you on each tab of what items you have marked cleared, which can sometimes make it easier when you're comparing against your bank statement. They've usually got a summary total of all the check totals that have cleared, so hopefully that makes it a little easier to type things out. And they've also added a change to functionality for these sort columns. So by default, this checks tab, sorts by check number, but if one user prefers maybe to look at that by check date, maybe they like to think it that way and have edited that. Prior versions, once I close the screen and come back in, it was always going back to its default. It will now actually retain those setting preferences for the sort by user. So if one person does like them to be, in this case, by that check date number that I had it in, and then somebody else maybe has it by dollar total or something like that, or has theirs just that check number, you can maintain those separately by each user to fit their preferences. And that sort feature does apply also in check deposit adjustment entry. If anybody has any changes there, it will also remember those by user. Last little change, I don't know how many folks that this one will apply for, but if anyone watching does their own import jobs and has ever made use of the temp fields that are part of that feature, let me get in here to I think my screen just a little moment here to load up. If you are ever adding a temp field, which can be used for a variety of reasons, there is now a new pop-up where before it always used to just be a temp 1, 2, 3. It was just a numeric value. And if you weren't super familiar with the job or couldn't remember, you'd almost have to do some comparison to look at the file you're importing from to find that. So you can just now put a name in those to kind of describe whatever data that field is capturing to make it easier for future review if you needed to.